let's get started. So before we even move into the slideshow, these are the topics and themes that we're going to cover. And I also want you to understand that this is factually based evidence that the brain is adaptable, and training your brain and training your body creates skills. You need to believe that, otherwise this presentation doesn't mean anything to you. The second point is learning is a way of creating our own potential. And what that means is that every time you learn something, your potential increases. So if you learn a skill in English, your potential to do well in English increases. It might only be by a fraction of a percent, but if you start to add up all of those small percentages, there is a big flow-on effect later on. And sometimes, as you'll see in this thing with some of the examples I give you, you don't see the benefits of what you're learning until very far down the track. And you just need to be patient and wait for that. The third point there is the brain knows how to protect itself. And the brain's very clever, and it's designed to make sure that you're not hurt. So that's something you're going to have to learn to navigate if you want to be a successful athlete, because all the elite athletes, from all the evidence and the research I've done, are able to switch off that part of their brain that's telling them to quit and give up. And I'll talk to you about that when we get to it. Okay, the next point. Comfort kills improvement. So if you're too comfortable in life and you're too comfortable in your training session, you're too comfortable in your classroom, you don't improve. That's a fact of life. And again, I'll go through how that works in the slideshow. Constraints produce creativity. A lot of the most creative people in the world come from poor backgrounds where they're forced to create their own fun. And I guess now with COVID-19 keeping you guys at home, you're having to see how intelligent and how creative you are at actually creating your own fun. The last 2 points is talent that screams and talent that whispers. And I'll explain this to you using different sporting examples to soccer, as well as some soccer examples. But I think you'll understand what I mean by this one when we get to this slide and you see the little video that goes with it. And the last one there, and I don't care what your coaches at your club level say, and your parents, and myself included, talent identification is as good as buying Tats Lotto tickets, fluke, or luck. And I will explain to you why that is the case. And it's mainly due to the fact that not every single person in the world develops at the same rate at the same time in the same environment. Everyone is different, as you've seen with your teammates at school, your peers in the classroom, your family members. Doesn't matter who gives you the information, you're all going to absorb it in a different way. And the same will go with this presentation. So to start with, I want you to watch a little video. Now I'm just going to detach for a second so I can make sure I've shared my audio, which I will do from now. And you can watch this little video and you can tell me at the end, because we're going to come back to this gentleman called Freddy Adu. Who is Freddy Adu?
I win. I hate to lose. I hate to lose. I want to succeed at whatever I do. Get a drive from that, and I think about it like, you know what, I don't want to lose. There's no way. If I set my mind to doing something, I don't want to fail at it.
He's able to have the ball on his foot and face people and go at him. He's so quick and changes direction so quickly that, you know, there's really very little that you can do to stop him.
If I have, you know, one-on-one in the corner, you know, I'm probably going to do 2 or 3 step overs to try and throw the guy off balance before, you know, I go by him. If it's to get across, oh, great. But if it's to get in position to shoot the ball, it's even better.
You know, we saw when he was 12 and 13 years old. He would pull some things off that, you know, you can't coach. And you don't want to coach either. You know, you want to let that come out, that freedom of expression. And that individualism that's special.
When you're playing and you're doing moves and putting your feet over the ball, you know, yeah, it's almost as if you're dancing, pretty much. You do the same thing when you're doing step overs or back and forth on the ball, and the way you cut the ball, and the way you know, shoot the ball, all that stuff. You know, when you're out there on the field, you don't always plan everything you're gonna do. Sometimes you just gotta improvise, and whatever comes to you at that moment, you know, you just pull it out.
You know, the player is that creative player, the player that does the unexpected. You know, the thing, he's in a tight spot and you're thinking, well, he's going to do this, and he does the opposite, and all of a sudden it's magic.
And you don't have to be the biggest guy, and you know, the oldest or the fastest or whatever to be the best. Take me for example. I'm not the biggest, I'm not the fastest, I'm not the quickest, but you know what? I'm doing something that you know no one's done before, which is play at this age. Just go out there and do your thing, man. Don't always listen to what all the negative things people say. Just listen to yourself and make sure you pick and choose actually who you listen to. Most importantly, your parents, because they all, you know, they're always going to help you be the best at what you do.
Okay, so that's Mr. Freddy Adu. Now, Freddy Adu is a footballer. At 14, he had a contract in America worth over $1 million. At 14, a senior contract. This was when I was growing up, because Freddie's 30 now. We're going to talk to you about what happens with Freddie's career a little bit later on, and we'll revisit him. But the important thing to remember is at that age, at 14, he was considered to be the best young player in the world, and he had $1 million contract to prove it. Okay? So why am I doing this seminar with you? Probably interesting to add this 3 slides into it, but the reason is this alarming stat. And that's that around the world, by the age of 13, around 70% of athletes have quit organised sports. So first of all, whoever's on this actual webinar, you've passed a significant landmark if you are out of year 7 and into year 8 and you've turned 13 and you're still playing organised sport. You haven't quit, which is really great. That's fantastic. That means some of the things in this seminar you're already doing, and I'll show you the results from the question I asked the other day in regards to the growth mindset. So why does this happen? The reason this happens is it becomes no longer fun. These are the most common reasons that kids give for giving up the sport across all sports in every country. Second one is you lose ownership of the experience. It's because usually the coach starts to control you too much, or your parents are telling you what to do from the sidelines, and it's no longer your experience. The third one there is not enough playing time, which is an important factor at your clubs where you've got large squads and sometimes you don't get more than 15 or 20 minutes a week, yet you train the whole week to play that game. The fourth one there is afraid to make mistakes, and there's going to be a strong focus on that in this seminar. And the last one is they feel like they're not respected. So I'm going to ask you a question which you don't need to answer. It's just something in your head to answer. And that is, why do 17-year-old boys or 16-year-old boys love putting on headphones and playing video games so much? And the answer to the question often is, if you ask them, there's no one behind their shoulder telling them off and telling them how to play and what to do. And that's an important factor. And that's something that you're going to start to understand as we go through this a little bit more. I'm just going to show you an image of our brain now. And you don't need to know the terminology of what is a prefrontal cortex and what is the parietal lobe. All you need to understand is every part of your brain is involved in different decision-making, different aspects of you as a person. All right, and you can see that different exercises actually stimulate different parts of your brain. So one example is doing some drills which are focused on keeping attention, switching between tasks or multitasking, and releasing your inhibition, so not feeling scared to make a mistake. A lot of those come from sports drills, and in our context, it would be soccer drills. All right. If you look at aerobic exercise down the bottom, the green part, okay, that every time you do exercise, longer term exercise like a long bike ride or a decent length run, you're activating parts of your hippocampus, which then helps with improvement of your memory. So it's just important for you to understand that. As you get older, you may start to explore the brain like I have and find out how fascinating this organ is. All right, the next question is, what is practice? So if you want to improve in chess, you don't necessarily get better at chess by just playing chess. You will get to a certain skill level by playing chess. But then, if you don't study better performers like grandmasters or other people that have different tactics and different methods of trying to win games, your improvement will get to a point and it will stable itself out. The same goes with the game of darts, if you've ever played darts before. You can go to a bar or into your garage or wherever your parents may have a dartboard, and you can start throwing darts at the target, and then you have a competition, or the loser pays the winner a fee because you're playing for money or for whatever it is that you guys would be doing. But you don't actually improve your performance in darts with any focus because it's a game. And sometimes you need to break a skill down to have success to develop it. So for example, reproducing my throwing motion and making sure that I'm copying it until I get that particular target and I can get it 9 times out of 10, and then I'd move to something else. And we'll talk to you about that later on in this seminar. An example I'm going to give you from our program is, and I'm not sure if he's online at the moment, but Mo Miri, who you know is a Year 10 student, at the moment he's working on his backspin passes, the long diagonal type, the backspin passes with some of his mates. And he sent me a video of his training session just to show me. And I had a look at it, and I picked up something immediately that him and his friends hadn't picked up, and that was they were working on backspin passes, but they were taking them like they were goal kicks. So the ball was standing still, and then they would take 4 or 5 steps back, run up and kick the ball. Sometimes it would be accurate, sometimes it would miss the target, sometimes it would curve left and right. And I asked him the question, is he going to be a goalkeeper? And he was a little bit confused by this question. And I said, if you want to be a goalkeeper, then it's good because you're practicing goal kicks. And I explained to him that if that practice was to become useful for him to use in a game, he would need to make it look like it would be in a game. So I said to him, why don't you run with the ball at speed, on an angle or straight, and then try and hit that pass to your teammate. So he thought about it for a little bit. He went back and did it, and then he messaged me the next day. And his message went something along the lines of, man, that was hard. Balls were going everywhere. I was exhausted, but I started to get the hang of it towards the end of the session. So which of those practice sessions do you think he got the most learning out of? Practice session 1, where he just stood there lining up his balls and pinging them to his teammate? Or session 2, where in a game situation he may be running, he most likely will be running because someone will be chasing him, trying to tackle him, and then he's trying to hit the pass, plus he has to do that when he's tired. So hopefully that triggers some thought in your head about how you practice and how you train. And there's going to be a seminar next week that links into this that's going to be about training and how to train effectively. But I need you to understand today's seminar in order to understand next week's one. So what is success? So there's an equation for success. Success equals performance. Performance equals potential minus interference. So how I perform is what I can do and the things that distract me from doing it or are stopping me from doing it, which take away from the ability that I have or the potential that I have. And I'm going to show you some examples from some top athletes in the world in the next couple of slides. And what I want you to understand as well, the first point there is great talent is not always the right talent. And what that means is you may be good for one position, you may be good for 5 positions, you may be terrific at mathematics, but that doesn't mean that talent transfers to something else. It might in certain fields, but more likely than not, it's not going to unless you've consciously thought about how to transfer it. The second point there is what you see is not necessarily what you get. So in a training session, when everything looks good from the outside and the cones are all set up and everyone's following the coach's instructions, cone A to cone B to cone C, and it's constantly following the same pattern, it might look good from the outside, but I'm seeing it from the outside. And then I watch it on a game when we actually play a game and we don't get that. So there's some sort of a problem with how we're training ourselves. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. And the next one there, and the final one there for you to remember, is never overrate certificates and never underrate character. This applies to yourself, but more importantly, this applies to the people around you that you're comparing yourself to. So you may have people in the program, and we do have them in the program, that have far more experience than other people in terms of where they've played, how much they've spent on extra coaching, how many hours they've put into their practice, how long they've been playing soccer for. But that doesn't mean they're going to make it at the end as a professional player. And again, I ask you the question, who is Freddy Adu? And we'll find out later on. All right, I'm going to watch a little video now about performance and development and how they link up.
An easy way to understand why we mess up talent identification is to separate performance from potential. Imagine a matrix like this. The x-axis assesses potential. How good can a person become in the future, short-term as well as long-term? The y-axis assesses current performance, the result that a person delivers here and now. Let me give you an example. Usain Bolt, the fastest man on the planet, and the guy who ended up beating Asafa Powell's world record. Bolt is one of those people who was spectacular even in childhood. Already at the age of 13, he was predicted to be the man who would set new standards in the sprint distances. In our matrix, people like Bolt are categorized as high performers and high potential. Usain Bolt is an example of what you would call a shouting talent. Asaf Appel, on the other hand, demonstrated nothing extraordinary in his early performances. Even at age 18, his performance was really average. The same was true for Paul McCartney, Ronaldo, and Michael Jordan. For some reason, their potential did not manifest in current high performance. They're all examples of what you could call whispering talents. And that's just the point. How do you find potential in something that looks ordinary at the moment?
Okay, so hopefully that gives you a bit of a picture into what I'm going to go into at the moment. You've obviously heard of Usain Bolt as the fastest man alive, and he also tried to become a soccer player but couldn't transfer his talent. That goes back to that previous slide. And Asaf Appel held the world record prior to him. They both trained at the same academy. We'll get to them in a moment, and we're actually going to have a look at that academy in Jamaica. I want you to have a look at this little table and chart, and this links up to the previous video that you've just watched. And I want you to think about, just before I do that, I just want to double check that people aren't still trying to get in there being blocked out. No, they seem to be okay. Good. I'll go back to that. Now, this is a little example of where you can fit in talent and in terms of what you're producing right now, so your results, and what your values, your beliefs, and the characteristics that you're providing to become good. Because you have to do both, have success. You can't do one and not the other and have long-term success. And again, this is something that's been researched and put into practice through sport, through academics, through music, through a lot of different fields by experts that have looked at these results and this data. So in group one, these are the players, the athletes, the talents that everybody wants. They're the ones that from the age of 17 or 18, you can already tell, even earlier in some cases in some sports like gymnastics or tennis, you can already tell that they have all the characteristics to be a number one or a top player, a world champion or a gold medalist. It's just a matter of time, okay? These are the ones that are hard to find. But if you have them and you've seen them in sporting examples like Usain Bolt, like Cristiano Ronaldo, for example, Messi, these guys have all been outstanding for a long time. And they've been outstanding since they were young. The next group of players are the ones that try their butts off, train really hard, do all the right things, eat well, follow instructions, learn. But at the moment, they're not getting the results that match up to how much they're putting in. So they're putting in all of this energy and effort into becoming really good at something. But at the moment, the results are not there. These are the athletes that we want, that everybody wants, because at some point it will fall into place, and I'll show you some examples later. The third group is the one that at the moment there's no results and they're not putting in the effort, and they're the ones that will fall into that 70% category at the start of the presentation at the age of 13 or even a little bit older, where they give up on a sport and they maybe focus on something else. And this is not to say that you will not move to some other particular sport or something else that you're interested in, and you'll put the effort into that, because you may just not have the passion anymore for the thing that you're doing, which in our example would be soccer. The last group there is the fourth group, and that's the kind of player that you see at the age of 12 that looks incredible, can juggle the ball 1,000 times, million step overs, both feet, skill, wins games on their own, or they're physically bigger, stronger, faster than everyone else, and they dominate. And then they dominate and they dominate and they dominate, and they get to 15 and 16, and all of a sudden people start to grow and catch up, and that domination is no longer there. But because they didn't have the work rate, the values, the right guidance, the right environment, they didn't get that star on the other side, and they were unable to take that early promise and early talent and make something of it later on. So if you look at it in this chart, the ones that Usain Bolts are in this top right-hand corner. High potential, high performance. These are the ones that every coach wants and you want to be. If you're not already this one, you should be high potential, moderate performance, or really high potential, but low performance. And that just means it's a matter of time, and it's a matter of how much you're willing to give it and how patient you're willing to be. What we call this top right-hand corner is talent that screams. So it's basically anyone that, even if you don't understand the sport, you can see that person playing and you'll kind of get that they're really, really good. So that could be you watching the Aussie Open tennis and you watch the top two players playing the final and you're like, yeah, you can tell they're really good. Okay. But if you were watching a first round game in the Aussie Open and it was an unknown player against a really good player and you could see really strong potential in one of the players and the other one was already an older player that didn't have the right attitude, then you could see and potentially say, okay, they don't fit into this category in the top right-hand corner where everyone wants to be. The rest of it, anything in the red, is really challenging for you to stay in, and this applies to your schooling as well, where you may have some good potential and you may have low performance, but then you don't decide to work harder to get yourself to the high potential low performance and then move across to this side. The whole objective of this is, can you move yourself into this top right-hand bracket during the course of your life? Okay, so we call that again the talent that screams, and the talent that whispers are these ones. And they're the ones that don't get noticed. And often, and we as coaches, and this is why I say to you about talent identification, and there'll be an example that I'll show you now, and there's been so many of them, but this one's a really good one because it matches up with Freddy Adu really well, and that is, we don't know. So at 15, I don't know how much more you're going to improve. I can have a guess like every other person, and I will have a guess, but most of the time it's wrong. And any talent scout that says otherwise, the proof is actually in all those players that are at 14, 15, 16 are told they're going to be superstars, and then they get to 18, 19, and all of a sudden nothing's happened. They haven't gone to that next level because somewhere along the pathway they haven't implemented the values and the cultural, environmental things that come with you deciding that this is what you really want to do. So let's look at who knows talent. I'm going to look at Jamaica's MVP track and field club. This is where Usain Bolt, Asafa Powell, and a whole heap of other Olympians have come from. They train on a grass field. They train with really basic equipment. The gym looks like it's from the 1950s and is covered in rust. Yet they're producing the best Olympic athletes and world champions, and they've been doing so since 1999. Why? This is the sprint coach who has absolutely no background in coaching. He comes from an economics background, but this is what he came up with as his idea of why these athletes are able to continually reach top levels. The biggest mistake in the Western world, and we belong to the Western world in Australia, is trying to motivate people by giving them more and more comfort. I want to test people to see who wants it the most. So he can afford to build a top quality gym. He can afford to surface the track and make it incredible. But he believes that if that happens, the players will get too comfortable and they will stop developing. And if they stop developing, they're not going to reach world champions because you need to be ruthless to get to that level. And that's an interesting point because in a soccer sense, you've all heard of Chelsea Football Club in England. They've got a $100 million investment in their academy, and they've had that since Roman Abramovich, who's a very rich Russian oil exporter, was able to invest that into the club. Yet until the last 2 years where they had a transfer ban, no one had made it into their first team, and they'd spent $100 million on these players. But these players were arriving to training in limousines, in chauffeured cars. Everything was done for them. Boots were polished. They had boot contracts at 16. They thought they were going to be full-time pros, and they were talented. They were the best kids in London, but nothing happened of them. So this is an example of giving people too much and taking away that hunger and that drive that you need to become successful in anything in life. Because if you're not hungry and the next person's hungrier than you, what's going to happen? Okay, that's his record down the bottom. 33 gold, 35 silver, 13 bronze medals. So you could argue that this gentleman understands. Now, he's the guy that took that Asafa Powell, who was getting times of 10.6, and didn't choose an athlete that had a time of 10.2. And he said to the guys, I chose Asafa Powell because he's had no training at any club level. He's had no proper coaching. He's just working on what he's done naturally. So if I can work with him and improve him, I believe I can get him to under 10 seconds, which he successfully did. Whereas the other athlete that he had a choice between that was already 0.4 seconds quicker, and if you're just looking at the numbers, and the numbers can sometimes lie, then you'd choose that athlete. But he didn't, and he was right. That athlete that had 10.2 back then didn't go on to become an Olympic athlete. The other one became a gold medalist. Here's a little example of how sometimes we get a little bit too comfortable. So there's a 24-hour gym in California, and there's an escalator to get into the gym. I thought a gym was for exercise. Anyway, it's just a little funny image I thought I'd break it up with for you. This is where the Jamaicans train. It's a grass field. It looks like the paddock next to the back of the synthetic field at KDC. And these are top athletes. These are Olympic champions. Okay, that's what they train on. And most of their drive comes from each other and pushing each other to become better. They call it training ugly. Why do we train ugly? We train ugly because you want to perform when it counts. And when does it count? It counts when you're on a trial. It counts when you're playing in a match. That's the most important time to perform. So there's an example from baseball. One group of kids did a training session where they took 45 pitches, 3 sets of 15, and they hit 15 fastballs, and then they had a break. Then they hit 15 curveballs, and then 15 change-ups. So they knew exactly what ball was coming to them, and they were fantastic. They were hitting the shots out of the park because they started to adapt to it, and they knew where the pitch was going, and they were fantastic. The same coach sent his other half of kids down to the other side of the field, and they hit 45 random pitches. So sometimes it would be a curveball, sometimes it would be a fastball, and sometimes it would be a changeup. They didn't know. They had to start looking at the last second of the pitcher's arm and their shoulder position and their eyes to start making a guess on where it was going. Now, for 5 weeks, they did this training. The first group looked phenomenal. They started to get better and better from the sidelines watching them, whereas the other group took a while and they slowly got a little bit better, but there was a massive difference when you looked at them from the sidelines. The problem is when they went into a game situation, the second group had far more success on hitting their strikes and getting to bases than the first group. Yet if you looked at their training session from the sidelines, you'd think, oh, that bottom group's hopeless because they're making so many mistakes. And this is where this little bit of advice comes to you. If you're not making mistakes and you're not challenging yourself to get better, you're not improving. You may look like you're improving, you give the illusion and it looks pretty from the outside, but it doesn't mean it's actually going to make you a better player. So have a think about that. The same goes in the classroom. Okay, if you're given a standard task and you're able to complete that quickly and you don't ask for the extra work or you don't try and do it better, like a second draft of something or solve a problem in a different way, you're not going to improve. This is another place I wanted to show you. This is in Kenya. Now, that's their facility. And I'll go through the club. I just want you to take that image in for a second and tell me what you think of the quality of that facility. Or don't tell me, but just visualize it. What I will tell you about this facility is like the Jamaican story. This place produces the most, and it's just one village, by the way, produces the highest amount of Olympic middle and long distance runners, and it has done so for the last 25 years, 30 years actually for this one. So some people say it's genetics, but that's been disproven because there's a lot of there's a lot of Africans that have similar genetics to Kenyans, but they're not as successful as Kenyans. So genetics is not the reason. The environment is the reason. Now, Kenya has a population of 42,000, give or take. St. Albans, which is a suburb we all know, has about 57,000. Okay, so it's about the size of St. Albans. They have 12 current and former Olympic athletes. That's a massive number for that amount of people. I'm pretty sure our St. Albans doesn't have any at the moment. This is what a Kenyan runner does. They train at 6 a.m., they rest, they eat. They train at 10 a.m., they rest, they eat, and they train at 4 p.m. Before the first session, they do an hour of yoga at 5 till 6. And then that first session's light, the second session's hard, and the third session's light. They do that for 6 days a week. They have one 400-meter running track, which you saw in that picture with a crappy soccer pitch in the middle. And there's about 400 runners training at any time. They just start at different parts of the track. They don't use GPSs. They don't film their sessions with drones. They don't use cameras. They don't use heart rate monitors. And they don't use blood checking, so they don't take samples of blood to see how the oxygen is working in their body. They use a stopwatch, like this $10 one from Kmart. And the reason they have success is something that you're going to hear from a guy that actually went there, and I'll show you the video after this, is because there are more parts to success that we can't see, that you can't buy, that doesn't matter if you've got the $200 pair of boots, the $50 bargain bin pair, or the $400 pair with your initials on them. They're not going to make you play better, because it's got to come from within. So this is a quote from their head coach, who, by the way, is just an Irish teacher that came to live in Kenya, and he's not an athletic performance coach by any stretch of the imagination. He just created an environment for these runners. When you were young, you were running with your heart. When you grow older, you start running with your brain. You start calculating and worrying if the pace is too fast or if you might sustain an injury. As a youngster, you just go out and do it. My job is to keep the youthful, aggressive instinct alive in my athletes when they grow older. And that's what they do. So this video you're going to see of this gentleman now, he ran against 14-year-old girls. He's an experienced mid-20s runner from, I think he's from America. And he was thumped, absolutely thumped by 14-year-old girls running. And this is what he had to say. So have a listen to this.
Point out 9 things. First, consistency. They don't skip workouts. They do every day focus on running. No skips, no slipping out, no distraction. Every morning 6 a.m. they go for easy run. At 10 a.m. they do hard training, and at 4 p.m. they do easy run and core strength every single day except Sunday. Second, gratitude. They're just so grateful for the opportunity to train and grow as a person. Third thing is focus. They don't mess around. When they are doing their hard training, they don't talk. They are super focused in the moment, in their form, in their rhythm. Like, I've never seen any athletes so focused. And fourth, like, again, hard work. There's no, so many people say Kenyans are born with it. Yes, they might have some talent. Their physique is perfect for middle to long distance running. But if you come and see how hard they work every day, you're just gonna be like, okay, they deserve it, because I mean, the amount of hours and energy they put into it is just amazing. The discipline is amazing. Fifth, the environment is amazing here as well. First, physical environment. The air is super clean here, and the terrain, you have the best terrain to train for distance running. There are a lot of hills too, so you naturally build up your tolerance and strengths to hills, uphill and downhill as well. Also, social environment. Your peers and colleagues, or the people you used to know, are not just runners. They break world records. They win Boston, they win Chicago, they win London. So for Kenyans, their goal is not, oh, I'll run 2:10 or I'll become national champion, I'll become an Olympian. Their goal is to actually, oh, I'll see if I can break David Rudisha's record. I'll see if I can break Eliud Kipchoge's record. It's just standard, is just different, and all your peers are also running like at the top level, world's top level. So it just gives you a different perspective on what you're doing. You really just strive to be the best in the world. 6 is rest. They rest a lot. They are world class at resting 3 times a day. So in the morning they run, eat, rest. Afternoon, run, eat, rest. Evening, run, eat, and sleep. You need good rest for your body to recover and your mind to be fresh next day when you go out for another training. 7 is they keep it simple. As long as the athletes at St. Patrick's High School here with Brother Colum and Ian, they don't take blood during the training session to measure your lactic acid in your blood system. They don't have this heart rate monitoring. They don't have these fancy watches that measure how many microseconds your each foot spends on the ground to see if you're balanced, blah blah blah. They just use simple GPS watch. The athletes who have money, and the athletes who don't have money, they just simple stopwatch and timer. That's it. They keep it simple. That helps them to develop their intuition, their self-awareness about their own body and mind, which gives them tremendous strength when they're actually in the race, because they know what they're doing intuitively, and they can go or hold and go. Do what's best for them, which is a huge strength that a lot of, I think, Westerners and people who are in developed countries are losing, because we just rely on the numbers, heart rate, the strides per minute, all these numbers that we're seeing, and we're always concerned about our pace, but they know their pace without even looking at the watch. It's pretty incredible. So self-awareness. Eighth thing is trust. The athletes here trust the coaches completely. They trust the program completely. This is really important, I think, because when you trust the system and the coaches, you don't waste time thinking about the program you're doing. You don't question or doubt. You don't waste energy and time in what am I doing, if it's gonna be good for me. They just trust the system completely 100%. Also because the athletes who came through the program have become the world's best, so they don't all their energy is focused on training, not questioning or doubting the program or coaches. It helps them less distracted and helps them to be more focused. Ninth thing, it's I'm kind of cautious to talk about this, but it's the humble background. All the athletes who become runners in Kenya, as far as I'm told from coaches here, come from very humble backgrounds. For them, running is a great opportunity to really just transform not only their lives, but their families and their relatives. It's just a huge opportunity. So for them to be, invited to this camp and train and grow, training with world-class athletes is just tremendous opportunity. So for them, the drive to succeed is so big. So it seems like that inspires them and motivates them to stay focused and work hard. But if you really want to see how they train, I mean, you have to come and see. When you come and see how they eat.
So he spent time with them, he trained with them, and he was able to basically come up with this concept of through analyzing what they were doing and interviewing them about why they're so successful. Now, I understand that some of those elements you can't replicate in your life, like the rest stuff, but if you can in smaller doses. So instead of staying up late at night watching two series of your Netflix, you might go to bed a little bit early and catch up on your sleep, so you can get up a little bit earlier and maybe do a light session in the morning or some stretching, or get up and do your push-ups and your sit-ups before school. So it's a question of your mindset. What do you want from it? Now, they come from humble backgrounds, so perhaps for them it's a question of, well, I really want to do well so that my family can have rewards later on, so that we can live a slightly more comfortable life. Now, at the moment, if you have a comfortable life where you've got a home to go to and food on your table, you may have to recreate that in your training and how you drive yourself. Why are you playing? Why are you training? What do you want from the game? Okay. Same goes with your education. What do you want from your education? Is your target just get into uni? Okay. You're in uni. What happens then? So it's something for you to think about. Now, we're going to look at this one. This will be a soccer specific one for you. Before I go to this one, any questions so far or anything that you want to add to it? Nothing at the moment? Okay. I'll go back into that. All right. So who knows talent? We're going to go through a soccer example for you now. This will be a quick one, but it's something that I think will make you think differently. So remember, I'm asking you that question again, who is Freddy Adu later on? You've got 16 players to choose from. This is a study from Denmark where a head coach and 4 other coaches had to pick from their academy, which only had 16 players, very small academy. It was their first batch of players. So imagine the KDC soccer school first year. We had to pick from 16 players. We had to choose which player we thought was, one, the most likely to get a professional contract, and then the 5th one being the 5th best ranked player. And obviously anyone that didn't make the top 5, you pretty much thought were not going to make it at all as a player. So these coaches who are training these kids for X amount of years, by the way, the kids are already 15 years old, okay? And the coaches are all highly skilled, UEFA A license, 100+ years of player development and coaching between them when you add up the numbers. So they've been coaching for 20, 30 years a pop, right? And they see these kids day in, day out. It's their training program. So they write down their names. Then they put them inside a container. And then at the end of these kids' scholarship, so when they get to 18, they go and revisit the box. There was one name that no one wrote down. His name was Simon Kier. And we're going to get to him a little bit later on. But not one person wrote his name down in their list of top 5 players. And the reason is, according to the head coach of this academy that actually developed it, is we only took this kid at 15 because his dad was the kit man and one other kid pulled out and didn't take a spot in our academy. So we had one spot to fill and we literally had 24 hours to fill it. We didn't like him as a player. We thought he had a poor attitude and he was lazy as well. So this is the characteristics of this player that at the end of that first year, they still thought he was the same as he was then. Now, the coach did one thing. He couldn't work out how to help this kid. And this coach is quite an intelligent man and a professor as well. So he said, I'm going to send you to a sports psychologist. And he sent him to a sports psychologist. And this Simon Kier boy went to the sports psychologist, came back, and he was carrying a little briefcase, like what you would call one of those plastic pocket folders with all of your information. And he asked him, well, what's in there? He goes, I'm setting some short-term and some long-term goals and how I'm going to get there. Okay, so the kid's attitude changed overnight. The next time he was at the training camp, he was just training properly and normally, but he was so far behind the rest of them, no one thought anything of him. They'd already come up with their rankings. That's the end of the story until later on. So before we go to return to that story with Freddy Adu, I want to show you something that's affecting a lot of you at the moment, and hopefully you'll understand where you're at the moment and you won't get as frustrated as you are at some points when you can't match it physically with other people. This is the Norway under-17 soccer team from a few years ago. All right. This is where coaches sometimes, and at your clubs it's the same thing. I guarantee you this because I see it all the time when I help people with selection. They like the bigger, stronger, faster player because the bigger, stronger, faster player is ready to win them games. Okay. They can argue what they want, but that's why you choose them. January to March, it happens at under-17 level at the World Cup as well. January to March, 59% of the squad that was selected for this tournament were born in January to March. So therefore, they were already, for example, they'd already turned 17 at that point of the year. April to June, 29%. July to September, only 12%. And in that same squad, from October to December, the last 3 months of the year, 0% players selected. Now, that's something you've got to think about for yourselves, depending on where you were born, what year and what month, what age group you're playing in at the moment, and has your physical growth, has your growth spurt happened yet? Because this is what that can look like without you even knowing it. Yes, you're in the same year level. Yes, you're playing in the same team. But if I'm born at the start of the year, I'm 9 years, 11 months, I'm 364 days older than the one that's born right at the end of the year. And you've got to understand this. You're going through puberty where your growth is very unpredictable and it's also very rapid. So if someone's already started growing and they're big, they're dominant. Now, that might mean they get selected in Melbourne Victory or Melbourne City or Western United next year. It may mean that they get better coaching because of that. But what it doesn't often mean later on is that they're actually going to become professional players. And that's got to do with our dear friend Freddy Adu. I'm going to tell you a little story about a coach that was doing a study on girls basketball. So he was a coach, but he didn't understand basketball, but his daughter wanted to play basketball. And he was watching her play junior under-10s basketball in America. And he's watching his daughter play, and when they play junior basketball, they have modified goals. Just like if you played juniors, sub-juniors, before you came to us, you would have played in smaller grounds, smaller goals, less people on the field, more touches on the ball. Makes sense, yeah? He watched these kids play on these modified basketball courts, and he saw the kids having really good fun and having lots of success, and their technique of shooting was really, really good. From under-10s to under-11s, they hadn't grown much, but at under-11s, they lifted the ring right up to the full size. What happened to their technique? Instead of them throwing the ball properly or shooting the ball properly, they started to do underhanded throws, two-handed throws. And he watched this from the sidelines as someone that studies sport and studies the development of children, and he couldn't believe how stupid it looked from the sidelines, but nobody seemed to care because the parents were happy to see them playing big basketball, but it was actually hurting their development in terms of those skills. So to link that to you with your age, you need to be a little bit patient. If you're one of the smaller people, you need to be a little bit patient and wait for your growth spurt. But that doesn't mean you become lazy and you don't train hard. It means you use this time to train parts of your brain, your skills that you're going to need when you do get that growth spurt and you do become stronger. And if you're already big and strong and you're in that early part of the year, you need to drive every single session to get the most out of it and challenge yourself and ask your coaches to push you and drive you further. Otherwise, we'll get back to it, but Freddy Adu and Simon Kerr will come to talk to you. Okay, this was a study done in Serbia looking at an under-14s highly talented squad of players. 11.8% of those early mature ones in that first bracket of the year made it to the top level out of their whole academy, all right? 38.1% in that middle section, so from June or end of May through to August, 38% made it to the top level. But from that end of the category one, 60.1% of late maturing players reach the elite level. So is it better for you to dominate early and not learn? Or is it better for you to struggle early, stay with it, keep fighting, and then when the time is right at the end, when you want to be successful and get a professional contract, that's when you break through. It's something you got to start thinking about. You have a greater likelihood of becoming an elite top-level performer if you're a late maturing child, but you manage to get into a good program like our program at school or a good club where they're coaching you well and they're trying to teach you the fundamental skills that you're going to need for the game. And then you develop a resilience, a fight, a drive where you just want to keep going and you don't take it to heart that someone's bigger and stronger and they beat you in that sprint or they push you off the ball. But you stick with it and you just wait until Mother Nature kicks in. That's the key. So that relates to the growth mindset. I'd love you to watch this video and take this information in.
So check this out. Carol Dweck and her colleagues wanted to look into the impacts that praise had on children's development. So what they did is they took over 400 fifth grade students from all across the nation and they did a really simple yet interesting study. Here's how it went down. They gave all the kids a really easy nonverbal IQ test. There were 10 questions, and at the end of the test, they praised all the children in one of two ways. The first group was praised for their intelligence. So they said, "Wow, great job, you must be really smart at this." Now the second group was praised for their effort. So they said, "Wow, great job, you must have worked really hard at this." Now this is a really subtle difference, but the impact it had is incredible. So after praising the kids and getting them divided up into the two groups, they gave them all an option for their next test. The first option was, hey, this next test is going to be a little bit harder, but it's going to be a great opportunity to learn and grow. Now the second option was, this next test will be similar to the first and you will surely do well on it. Now the interesting thing is, out of the group that was praised for their intelligence, 67% of them chose the easier option, while 92% of the kids who were praised for their effort chose the harder test. This is unbelievable to think about, how just the subtle difference in the way that they were praised had such an impact. Carol Dweck explains why this happens.
The child or adult hears, "Oh, you think I'm brilliant and talented. That's why you admire me. That's why you value me. I better not do anything that will disprove this evaluation." As a result, they enter a fixed mindset, they play it safe in the future, and they limit the growth of their talents. Whereas focusing on the strategies they use, the way they're stretching themselves and taking on hard tasks, the intense practice they're doing, those are the kinds of things that say to a child or an older athlete, it's about the process of growth. As a result, they don't feel, oh, if I make a mistake, you won't think I'm talented. They think, oh, if I don't take on hard things and stick to them, I'm not going to grow.
Next, Dweck and her colleagues gave all the kids a really difficult test. It was one that they would surely fail, but they wanted to look at how the different kids attacked this challenge. Dweck noticed that the group that was praised for effort worked harder, longer, and actually enjoyed this test more than the group that was praised for their intelligence. This group got really frustrated with this test and had the tendency to give up early. After this artificially induced failure round, all of the kids were given a third and final test. Now this test was the same level of difficulty as the first one, but check out the results. The group that was praised for their intelligence actually did worse on this test than the first one. Their average score actually dropped by 20%, while the group that was praised for their effort did significantly better, raising their average score by nearly 30%. This is a 50% difference in performance that was caused by a few subtle differences in the way that they were praised. This study shows how praise can either make or break a child's development. I mean, we all do it. We all want to be positive with the children we work with, so teachers, coaches, parents are always looking for ways to support their kids and tend to praise them quite a bit. So we need to look at research like this and realize, okay, praise is a good thing and there's nothing wrong with being positive, but we need to be very careful about praising someone's intelligence or abilities and focus more on the process and the effort that they put forward.
Okay. Hopefully you've digested that a little bit, and there's links to all of these bits of information at the end in my bibliography. But there's a question that I posed to you a couple of days ago on Edmodo, and I was rapt to get 53 responses, which considering I know not everyone goes on to Edmodo daily, and I actually wanted this for this particular presentation to show you. I gave you a mindset question. I said, when you get praised for your natural talent, like you are so good at this, would you rather have that kind of praise, or would you rather have the praise that says, you must have worked really hard at this, love your effort, love your work, yeah, just keep going, just keep pushing yourself. 92% of you chose that option, which for me is the most pleasing aspect I've ever seen in the program, because the growth mindset is something I started to study and believe in about 4 years ago, and started to put it into how we praise you at training and in the classroom and when you do something well. And even after your games, when we had competitions, and I'd send you an Edmodo message with some praise, if you go back and have a look at them, I don't think there's a moment that I've praised you in the last 3 or 4 years on your natural talent, or you're just a star, or you're brilliant. Not to your face, because that's going to kill your growth. And that's something that I think is really important for you moving forward, and even talking to your parents and your coaches about it. If you see someone praising you for your natural talent, I'd take that as an insult. That means you're not training hard to get better. That means it just happened for you. And it doesn't just happen for anybody. Trust me, in any form of life, in any walk of life, for anyone to have any success at anything they do, it requires hours and hours and hours of work and lots of mistakes and lots of failure. So the question is, do you want to look good on Instagram or in social media or in front of your parents, or do you actually want to get better? Because if you want to look good, you won't make many mistakes, therefore you're not going to try much, therefore you're not going to challenge yourself. But if you want to get better, you're going to fall down, you're going to use your opposite foot and turn the ball over, you're going to not complain when someone puts you in a different position and tries to educate you on a different aspect of the game that you need to learn. An example, there was a coach called Johan Cruyff, very famous coach, and when he saw some players playing in the youth team at Barcelona when he was the head coach there and developed their whole academy, which created Messi, Xavi, Iniesta, Busquets, all of these guys, he made sure that he saw a young winger that was really, really good at attacking but couldn't defend. So he went and put him in he made sure that he went into a right back position for 3 or 4 weeks, and he was terrible. Losing every time. When he went forward and overlapped, he was great. He didn't know how to defend, but he learnt how to defend. And the academy coach, one of the other academy coaches said to him, well, you've stuffed me up. I've lost games. And he goes, I don't care if you lose an under-13s game, but that kid needs to learn how to defend, because I think he could maybe play for the first team one day, but he will never play for the first team if he doesn't know how to defend. So that's a really important lesson. If that's something coming from the top club, and you're at your clubs now and your coach only wants to play you in one position because that's going to win him a game, I'd be arguing with him and do it in the right way and try and get yourself into a different position on the field just to get out of your comfort zone, especially if you're finding it easy against a team that's not very strong, which unfortunately you get in your competitions. So something to think about. And that comes down to trust. Trust of your coach, trust of your parents, trust of yourself. So trust looks like this. It's got 3 legs, and then the base of it is trust. Leg 1, all right, is your parents. Leg 2 is yourself. Leg 3 is your coach. If any one of those legs breaks off and doesn't do the right thing, then you fall down. You don't have the support. You're a three-legged chair. Okay. If someone takes the trust away, the whole thing falls down anyway. So if you lose the trust, then it makes life very difficult for you. So that's something that I'm going to cover with you in the next presentation, but I just want you to visualize it a little bit. And there's a little message down the bottom there. Great coaches are trusted by their athletes, and those athletes know that their coach has their best interest in mind. And I was lucky in my lifetime to have a couple of coaches that I believe, upon reflection now as an adult, were great in that sense. And I trusted them, and I was able to talk to them and learn from them and actually listen to them when they suggested something that I didn't agree with. Okay. So if you want to improve, and we're getting towards the end, so you've been really good so far, you need to be asking yourselves these questions. And I would argue not at the end of a training session. I would actually say during the training session when you're getting your drink, when you're having a little break in between. If you just did a drill or an activity, a possession game, a transition game, whatever it was, you did something, you ask yourself what went well in that thing? What needs work? And just visualize it in your mind while you're having your drink. You can still giggle with your mates, but you're thinking about something else. And at the end of your session, then what did you learn from today that you can work on in practice in order to improve? If you are asking yourself these questions 2 to 3 times a training session, congratulations, you have a growth mindset. You're going to reach your maximum potential if you stick to it. And now I don't know what that is because everyone's got a different potential level, but if you stick to this methodology and if you do this in your classrooms with your education and you do this at home with your family, when you evaluate yourself, okay, feedback becomes like this. Honest feedback is like getting into a very hot bath. You know, when you first step into a hot bath, it burns a little bit to begin with, but then you get used to it. And then when you lie down in the bath, you actually like it and you don't want to get out. Think of a spa bath, yeah? And then you start to thrive on it. That's what feedback is. When someone tells you that you've had a poor game or you've made a mistake, I'm the same, or I used to be until I started to understand this stuff a bit more. I get upset because I take it personally. And then when I've had a bit of time to think about things, I actually realized, hang on a second, it wasn't personal. It was something that the coach was trying to get me to think about differently. And I've had these agreements and disagreements with you guys during training at all times. Most of the time it's because I want to test you and make you think about something differently or think about the impact of your body language and your words towards other people. But it's a big thing for you to learn to take feedback, to take criticism, because life is full of it and you need to be able to deal with it in order to have success. And this quote is, for me, the bee's knees, absolute perfection. A winner is a loser who evaluated himself or herself. That's what a winner is. Because you've taken away all of your fears of failure and you've said, okay, I've made mistakes, now I can get myself better. And once that starts to creep into your everyday thinking, you're going to become unstoppable. Not instantly, but you'll start to see massive improvements overall. You need to believe. So, before we finish with our Mr. Adu and a few other quick slides, if you can't visualize any of this stuff happening and you can't visualize yourself in a situation where you can improve, it's going to be very difficult for you to get better in the future. So the first step from today is to start to think, what do I actually want and how do I see myself getting there? So that's something you can write down after we finish this in your little journal. You should start keeping a journal. Next week when I do a seminar, it's going to be about how to do this sort of stuff. So I'm just introducing the ideas to you today because I think there's a process, like I said, there's a process towards all your learning. If I just throw all of those concepts at you, you won't understand the background. I'm hoping by the end of this presentation, you'll have an understanding of the background of why this information is so important to you at this point of your life. Okay, too much info can sometimes limit your potential because you get confused and it can paralyze your belief system. It's better to have what you need to know right now and you focus on that and you fix that and then you worry about what's later on. And that could be something like, you know, trials for school teams, TIDC, Melbourne Victory, Melbourne City. That could be later on in the year. Don't worry about it today. Worry about what you need to do step by step to be eligible to be selected for these teams later on. Change what you worry about to something you can control, not what you can't control. That's for later. Okay? And this is the key. Belief is not about being right. It's about winning. And now, when you choose winning, winning it's an interesting thing because people say, oh, winning's important, winning's not important. Winning is always important, but winning should never be your focus in a game. Your focus should be understanding, learning, getting better. Because if you do all of that, you'll win. Most of the time, you'll end up winning. But if you say, I need to win, I need to win, I need to win, you start to paralyze yourself in fear. Oh my God, what if I make a mistake? We're not going to win. Once you start believing you're going to make a mistake, guess what? You're going to make a mistake. That's for next week's presentation. Okay? This one at the bottom is be realistic, but be unrealistic at the same time, which means my goal is to play for Australia. My goal is to play for the Matildas. If I want to get to the Matildas, I can't just say I want to play for the Matildas and that's my dream. What do I need to do for the next step? And then once I've achieved that one, once I've got to that level, let's say it's MPL women's, I want to play senior MPL women's. I want to get into the W League. From the W League, I want to get a chance to get into a Matildas squad. Then I'm in the Matildas. But every step has a layer that you have to pass. So have your big goal, but then go and sit down and say, all right, I want to, by the end of this year, I want to be one of the top 3 players in my team. How can I control any of that? Well, I can train a little bit more. I can work a bit on my opposite foot. I can watch a bit more of the game and understand the game. Whatever you choose to do, you choose to do. But if you don't have a process, it's not going to happen. And then you'll just be frustrated at the end of the year going, well, I didn't achieve my goals. Okay? We'll talk about goal setting next week. So what is success? If you run, this is for your brain to understand, right? If you run 100 meters as fast as you can, at some point you're going to get tired and you're going to feel discomfort and pain and fatigue. It's really not coming from your muscles, not over 1,000 meters, so not over a kilometer. Okay, well, not in a soccer match because we're not exhausting you. It's not like you're running for 8 hours, right? So that fatigue is coming from your brain. It's coming from your brain wanting to protect itself, and it doesn't want you to get into that pain threshold and push past pain, because our brain is about homeostasis, keeping the body level. Not too hot, not too cold, okay? It doesn't want you to damage yourself, so it uses emotions. So when you're running, picture this, visualize this. When I'm going for a hard run or I'm doing a tough training session in a game and I'm starting to get tired and I'm cramping up, what's happening in your brain? Your brain's telling you things like, I can't do this anymore. I'm tired. I need a rest. Oh, just sub me off. I'm wrecked. I've done enough. Okay? But that's not physical. That's your brain telling you, hey, let's give up on this. Let's quit because it'll be easier for me if I quit. This happens to me every single time I go for a run. My brain is telling me to stop the run. Why are you doing this? You're old. Give it up. You've had enough time playing soccer. Just go sit on the couch and watch TV. So I'm having this conversation with my brain while I'm running and exercising, saying, shut up, brain. I'm in control of this. I want to keep going. And you've always got more reserve, or always a little bit more charge in your battery that you can call upon when you need it. The problem is if you let your brain tell you to quit every time you feel a little bit of discomfort, you never get to that level of reserve, so you never know that you can go harder, faster, longer, stronger. You can always push yourself a little bit harder, just that little bit more. An extra minute of running. Last goal wins, and you absolutely kill yourself when the coach says that to try and get that last goal, so you win that last bit of the training session, you get to giggle at your mates, okay? Because when you give in to fatigue, that's you quitting. Okay? When you give in to that maths problem because you can't work it out, that's you quitting. When you can't structure that essay, you haven't followed those guidelines, and you haven't gone back and revised, that's you quitting. So you need to learn how to convince your brain that you are in control, that you decide what you want your brain to do. That takes a lot of time. That's going to be covered in the next one. So I want you to understand the power of the brain through this very short video related to Manchester United for all of you Man U fans.
What you do is do your work every day, every day, every day, every day, and those successes come to you. That's the secret. You see, it's about mental discipline. The mind is the athlete, the body is just the means. We think sport, and we look at sport in a physical way. We look at power and strength and speed and skill. But actually, what's driving those 4 things? What's driving them is attitude. It's attitude. The first day I went to Manchester United, which is one of our top clubs, soccer, I was watching 8 versus 8 possession. And Roy Keane, who's a warrior, not just an athlete, not just a competitor, but a warrior, mindset of a warrior. His team have got possession, and Dennis Irwin has got the ball. And he's looking up, he's trapped, he's going to lose the ball. And Roy Keane makes a beautiful run and signals, Dennis, where he wants the ball. And Dennis doesn't see him, doesn't hear him, doesn't respond, loses the ball. Roy Keane ran 40 yards to challenge his teammate. Get your head up. And I was shocked. And I was stood next to Sir Alex Ferguson, the manager of Manchester United. And he said, son, now you know why we win on a Saturday. We win on a Saturday because we have the mindset to train every day. Every day. And that's what you have to develop. And it's always a choice. So yes, sport is physical, technical, tactical, but it's the mind is the athlete. The mind is the athlete. The body's just the mean.
Okay, so that just reiterates that point. And this is, again, from people that are far more qualified and far more experienced than I am. I'm just sharing their information. So we come back to our dear friend Freddy Adu.
They called him the next Pele. He racked up high-paying contracts. At just 16 years old, he became a millionaire when he signed a major contract with Nike. Fast, skilled, powerful, Freddy Adu had it all and was on his way to becoming an incredible player. But then, everything went wrong.
Everybody who has seen Freddy play talks of his raw, natural talent.
The young American made his professional debut with DC United when he was only 14. He quickly stacked up unbelievable performances in MLS and gained the attention of some of the biggest teams around the world. Manchester United, Real Madrid, Inter Milan. Everyone wanted him for themselves. Everyone, including Ghana, his native country, which tried to draft him for the 2006 World Cup. But Adu grew up in the USA and was, at heart, an American. Finally, it was brand names which got the rising star. An overwhelming attention from the media, which turned out to be deeply distracting.
Just go out there and play, and just have fun.
I found myself making appearances everywhere, for advertisements, for an enormous amount of interviews. All of this pushed me away from the field, even though I was still so young. People only saw me as a marketing product. Overcome by it all, Adu decided to refuse the major European teams, afraid he wouldn't be able to live up to his own popularity. He finally joined Benfica in 2007 on his mother's advice. It was the beginning of the end for the young upstart. In Portugal, Adu was a mere shadow of his former self. For him, the European dream just didn't exist. He left Benfica for teams in Monaco, Greece, Turkey, Brazil, Serbia, and Finland, all of which turned out to be disasters. More than 15 years after his big debut, the next Pele had never lifted the World Cup. He hadn't won the Ballon d'Or. He hadn't taken home a single trophy from any championship. Worst of all, he'd been completely forgotten. In 2015, Adu returned to the States to be closer to his loved ones. He finally joined the USL Second Division, where no one seemed to know that this athlete could have had an exceptional career, were it not for all the media hype. Freddy, without a doubt, the greatest disappointment in the history of football.
So, my dear friend Freddy Adu. And you know what it was with him, amongst other things? It was the fact that everyone kept telling him he was a natural talent. Pelé, one of the greatest footballers of all time, said Freddy Adu is a gift from the gods. And that in the head of young Freddy Adu, as a young, if you imagine someone, you're 16 or 14 or 15. 14, he made his debut. 16, he'd signed his mega contract. So it's senior football. And everyone's telling you that you are naturally talented. You're a natural. It's a God-given gift. You're a star. So what happens to your intensity at training? Well, it's natural. It's going to happen for me. It didn't happen for him. So here's a little picture for you. This is from Transfer Market. So we've got, on one side, we've got Simon Kjaer, 15, not one of his coaches out of there were 16 boys to choose from. When he was 15 years of age, not one of his coaches ranked him in the top 5 of kids that may make it as a professional. At 18, he signed in Italy for Palermo. Then he signed after that for Roma, and then he's been on loan. He's on loan at AC Milan. His current transfer value is 5.2 million euros. Okay, and he's played at World Cups, European Championships, captain of his national team, 95 caps, 3 goals. At 15, he was not even considered to be one of the better players in his little tiny academy in Denmark, which would be the equivalent of you playing at a community club here in the western suburbs, and at 15 being one of the lowest ranked players in your team. But at 18, 3 years, and all that happened between that time, same environment, same coaches, all that changed was his mentality once he went to a sports psychologist and he started to develop a growth mindset. So he started training a bit extra by himself and writing down his goals. And then he was able to take that in 3 years and turn it into a career where he's probably made, let's say, $40 or $50 million. He's set for life. And he's got some really good habits. Freddy Adu, down the bottom, worth about 100,000 euros. Again, he's got no club, so he's not really worth anything, is he? But he hasn't had a club since 2018. Okay? This is current. This is as of last week. All right? As in the website. Now, he's 30 years old, so he's a year younger than this guy. And he's done. His career's over. And he hasn't achieved his potential. But at 16 or 14, he was rated as the most talented player in the world. So these guys were growing up around the same time, but worlds apart. They're in the same year. One's in June, one's in March. They're only a few months apart. It's fascinating to look at because it shows you how much the mind makes the difference. And don't forget, Freddy Adu was training with senior men. He was, at 18, he was meant to go to Manchester United, but Alex Ferguson said, oh, we'll just wait a little bit. They didn't want to pay the transfer fee at the time. So he was training in an elite environment with professional players, and Simon Kjær was training with kids his own age, like you guys and girls. So just visualize how powerful that mind is. Okay? And a lot of it's got to do with this, which is called deliberate practice. This is where you actually think about what you're doing. So enjoy this little video.
Here are some tips on how to do it well. Define success and drill deliberately. Define all the elements you need to practice to become successful. Then drill each element deliberately, one after the other. In tennis, that could be first your serves and then later your leg work. If you want to become a professional barista, first perfect your moves to make the espresso, then your skills to serve the ideal coffee. Plan, reflect, and take notes. Plan out your practice routine, for example in a notebook. After each session, reflect and write down what you've discovered. What worked? What didn't? The idea is to get a clear sense of how a particular session improves your skills, and then to experiment to find new and even better ways to achieve your goals. Go slow. To build a good foundation of muscle memory, practice slow and correctly. If we move too fast, we risk learning and internalizing the wrong skills, which can bring terrible consequences. To achieve mastery, our brain needs time to develop. So start slow and then gradually increase the speed until you give it all you've got. Limit your sessions to focus. Deliberate practice is hard mental work. Limit the sessions to a reasonable duration that allows you to stay focused. This may be 15 minutes if you are younger and 60 minutes if you are older. Cristiano Ronaldo does around 3 to 4 hours of football training a day. Young Shaolin monks practice 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the afternoon. To keep their attention high, they switch the style of practice every 10 minutes. Maximize practice time. Legendary basketball coach John Wooden used to let each of his players practice putting on socks and shoes so that they learned to do it really fast. By doing this, he maximized the time to practice throwing the ball and discussing game strategy with his team. Track small intervals of improvement. If you practice running 800 meters, count the milliseconds, not the minutes. If you are working out or practice controlling your diet, measure milligrams and millimeters. The smaller the data points you measure, the faster you see progress and the more you feel motivated to continue. Emulate practice, not performance. The top performance we see on screens or on stage is the result of endless hard work behind the curtain. If you want to become as good as Pavarotti in the opera or as skillful as Messi with the ball, don't watch them perform, study how they practice. Repetition makes perfect. In the 1990s, a team of German psychologists revealed that it takes 10,000 hours of deliberate practice to become a professional violinist. A similar study concluded it takes almost as long to become a great cigar maker. New workers in a Cuban cigar factory take around 25 seconds to make one cigar. After 100,000 repetitions, it takes them just 15 seconds, and after 1 million, only 8. To reach peak performance, it takes 7 years and 10 million repetitions of the same hand movements. Not practice, but repetition makes perfect. Professional football teams therefore play daily what the Spanish players call rondo. Piano players warm up with scales and arpeggios. Routine is everything. To reach mastery, young Shaolin monks get up at 5:30 a.m., then chant, eat breakfast, and practice 2 hours of Kung Fu. At 11:30, they have a vegetarian lunch with no liquids to aid digestion. At around 3 p.m., they practice another 2 hours. At 5:30 is dinner, followed by chanting. At 8, meditation. At 10, time for bed. Us normal people can start with 15 minutes every day and then slowly increase our session. Get a coach. The job of a coach is to show us our true potential and then guide us in the right direction.
Okay, so I stopped it at the coach one because you've already got a coach and you've got many of them. But that's really a very great quick summary of what's deliberate practice, and there's a lot of research into this, and I've done a lot of it myself, and I can talk to you about this at another time. But that's a really, if you go back and watch that video in your own time and you start to take, even you take 2 out of those 5 or 6 steps that they've got in there, you'll already see big improvements over time. And it's just a question of why are you doing things? If you're doing them to get better and you really believe you want to get better and potentially get a career in the sport of soccer or do really well academically, that's going to be entirely up to you. No one's going to see you do it. They're only going to see it at the end when you perform, and they're going to be like, wow, look how much, Nick's improved, or I can't believe Dante's improved so much, or have a look at this. Okay, so wait for that. So what can you do now to finish? When you train, for the next time you train, the next time you go out, it might be after this, is don't focus on how sore you are or how tired you are or how sore you are during the session and it becomes a tiring thing. Just tell yourself, I'm working this hard because I want this. This is what I want from this session. And then all of a sudden, your brain starts to go, okay, you want something out of this. I'll let you go a bit harder. I'll let you go a bit longer. You got to try it. You have to try this talking to yourself and visualization and see how far it can take you. Connect the pain that you're going to get, because you're going to get some pain, with positive thoughts. I'm sore, but you know what? I'm going to be flying tomorrow when I go shooting. Or, oh man, I feel a bit tight today, but that's okay. When I stretch off tonight, I'll feel really good, and then tomorrow I'll be fitter and stronger. Okay? So give yourself a positive affirmation. And you need to learn to tolerate discomfort. Okay? Nothing was achieved without you getting sweaty, tired, exhausted, and then repeat, and then again, and again, and again, and again, and then all of a sudden you see gains. That's life. Okay? So whenever you feel like you're going to quit something, ask yourself, why am I doing this? If the answer is good enough, you'll keep going. If you don't have the answer, then you're probably going to stop. So this is where I got my resources from. Again, you'll have access to this. These are all the books that I've taken this presentation and put it into practice for you. This is a really good article. That was the study of the boys in Serbia, if you're really interested in looking at that a bit more. And this is extra viewing for you. So a lot of those clips are shortened versions of longer explanations and a little bit more detail, but they go into different topics and themes. So if you're interested in any of this stuff, there's a starting point, and you know how it is with YouTube. Once you've clicked one video, on the side panel, you'll start to see other videos that will potentially link to them. There's some brilliant podcasts as well that you can put on and listen to. Mindfulness meditation is really good from the Headspace one if you want to learn to meditate and calm yourself before bed. The Talent Equation podcast is really good because there's lots of little topics on what athletes do and interviews with them and getting some more tips. Changing the Game is very similar to that one. It's done by coaches on elite athletes. And then the Train Ugly one's brilliant. There was one on sleep the other day that I looked at. And if you want to read a little bit more about our friend Freddy Adu, go for it. Read it. You got to. We always worry about those that have been successful, but most people are unsuccessful in their careers. And what you want to understand is why were they unsuccessful, and how do I not make those same mistakes? That's very important to understand as well. Okay. The next time I put up a session for you, I'm going to cover these 4 key things. How to practice, so how better to work yourself into a training state. How to visualize, so I'll be doing some mental conditioning. But again, I needed to go through this to give you the opportunity to understand that. I'm going to go through a realistic way to set some goals, and also what's called the flow state. And that kind of links in a bit with visualization. When you're in your peak performance and it feels like everything's happening smoothly, you're not thinking, that's called our flow state, and that's something we want to get into. Now, the last thing you're going to see for today actually came up literally 2 hours ago when I was on my internet feed just getting this ready. And it's Robin van Persie talking about his son. Now, Robin van Persie is a retired elite professional player from Manchester United, Arsenal, I believe Fenerbahce in Turkey as well, played for the Netherlands, scored that amazing headed goal, if you remember it, from the World Cup. This is what he says about his own son, who's playing elite football in Holland in one of the academies. I think he's at Feyenoord. So have a listen to this. And this is, I think, is a great way to finish today.
I actually had this chat last week, funny enough, seriously, with my son. So my son plays at Feyenoord. He played against Ajax under 14. He was on the bench. He didn't play. So in the car on the way back, he was like a bit moody, disappointed, complaining a little bit about others, about the coach, etc. And then I said, yeah. I said, but Shaquille, I said, you sound like a loser, you know, if you talk like this in a way, you sound like you lost. I said, you are blaming him, you're blaming her, you're blaming this, you're blaming everything. I said, but I don't hear one single thing about yourself. I said, winners, I said, they take control and they blame themselves and they look where they can improve. Yeah. And this is what you should be thinking about. So I didn't tell him what he should think about. You should ask yourself the question, are you a loser or are you a winner? I said, for me, it doesn't matter. I said, because I'm your dad. I said, the only job I have and your mom has is when you're 20, that you're a good boy, that you're ready for life. You know, you can make your mistakes, you can do what you want. I love you for the same amount. It doesn't matter for me if you make it as a football player or not. I said, but you say that this is your passion. So you should take control of your life and stop complaining, because it sounds like a loser. I said, and I don't mind. If you want to be a loser, be a loser. I still love you as much. I said, it doesn't matter for me. I said, but if you want to be a winner, take control of your life and stop complaining about others. And then I watched him train the next morning. My wife said, where are you going? I said, well, I'm going to watch this session. 2 days later, actually, because they played on Saturday and Monday morning. So I'm there sitting, cold, hoodie on. I'm looking and I see this tiger training, running, working. And I was like, okay. He realized he has to take control of his life. He's 13 now.
So a really powerful story, really relevant. You know, it's a week old, or a couple of weeks, obviously, before quarantine. And that's an elite player who's obviously had, you know, people would probably give his kid an opportunity. I would argue maybe because of his reputation, he was a junior at Feyenoord as well. But he's basically telling his kid, it's up to you. He can't play for him. And he needs to decide whether he's actually passionate about it and stop blaming other people. And that's a really powerful way. Winners take control. So I'm going to be proud of you, whatever happens with you in your soccer careers. If you get to the end of year 12 and we shake hands at the end because you managed to do 6 years of a program with us, I'm going to be proud of you. Your parents are going to be proud of you. Okay, even if they say otherwise, sometimes they're still going to be proud of you. But the question you need to ask yourself is, are you going to be someone that you're proud of? So are you going to finish to the maximum of your ability, whenever that is, when you're 30, when you're 20, when you're 40, in terms of soccer? Are you going to put in that extra bit of effort to make sure that you get the most out of everything you've got, the maximum of your potential? Because I'm telling you this, even if you don't, but you work your butt off to do it, you'll still be satisfied. But if you don't put in the effort, then you're always going to ask yourself, I could have, I should have, what if?